Hey everyone, welcome back to Low Budget Logistics, your logistics and supply chain explainer. Today we're going to continue the topic of talking about transportation and logistics, and we're talking about a different mode today. Obviously you can see it's ships, which is probably by far one of the oldest modes of transportation that you can think of. Right back in the day, they used to be using sailboats and catamarans, road things, and the like. Other than walking, it's probably the oldest form of transportation that there is, and it is still heavily in use today, specifically because you can carry a lot of stuff on a boat. It's pretty amazing how much you can get on there. All right, so like I said, you can get a lot of stuff onto a boat, and it's relatively cheap to do so, because you can make a boat really, really, really big. So we've all probably seen commercial shipping vessel, right? The big container ships that they have a bunch of boxes on top of it. They all sort of look the same. They're really, really long. They're really, really big, and like to see one up close, it's phenomenal. It's a masterpiece of mechanics and engineering that these things even float, and they're able to carry thousands of tons of stuff and cargo across the ocean over great distances. And so we'll talk a bit about that and sort of what they are and what they do and how they do it and why they're amazing. But really just know, like, it's relatively fast, and it's extremely cheap to actually use them. So similar to a train on the ground, you would use them for stuff that's like, low density or bigger stuff, and you can get a lot of things on there. So they're lots of fun to use. So typically the way that we in the US use them is that we're sourcing things from like Southeast China, Southeast Asia, and bringing them into the US. So we're going to cross over the Pacific Ocean. Obviously, there's only two ways to get across the Pacific Ocean. That is either on the air or on the ocean. That's it. There's no other way to do that. At least right now, not until Elon figures out a way to get rocket ships to be cheaper. But anyways, so you're gonna have to put it on a boat, and typically those boats, those ships have lanes, and commercial shipping lanes are extremely well established. They move from port to port, and generally speaking, they're going to move in a big circle. So where a ship might start, like we'll just call right, there's no beginning point to a circle. But we'll just call it the beginning point of our tale. We'll call it Hong Kong. And so in Hong Kong, it's in Southeast Asia, and it's a huge port. It's a massive port, and has been massive port for hundreds of years. So a ship will get loaded there, and then it will start moving. Now, if you know kind of about geography, Hong Kong sits at the bottom of China. There are other ports in China that are also important. So there's a port in Beijing, there's a port in Shanghai, and so that's sort of moving south to north where those ports are. So it would start in Hong Kong, it would move up to Beijing, get unloaded again in Beijing, and then again in Shanghai, continue to move up. It might port again in Korea, it might port in Japan, and then it would come across the ocean or across the continents, and then port again somewhere maybe in Canada, like in the Vancouver area, then Seattle, and then down further like Oakland, LA, Long Beach, right? So it's basically just making a big circle across the Pacific Ocean. Then once it sort of gets in LA and Long Beach, that's where most of the volume is going to actually come off of that ship, and then it will continue down. There might be some South American ports that it hits down either in Chile or Colombia or where have you. And then it will go, again, back across the ocean. It might hit a port in Australia, right? Maybe Sydney on that side of the world. And then, again, it'll just continue up. And so those ships are basically constantly circling the world. Now, sometimes they will actually, they'll just make a straight shot. They'll go from a big port like Yantian in China over to LA, Long Beach. But there has to be a real need for that. When we saw this happen a lot was in 2020 and 2021, when everyone in the U.S. was just buying a ton of stuff. There was actually a pretty major need to just go directly from one side of the earth to the other, one side of the ocean to the other. And so they did it. But typically, like I said, it makes circles. And on the East Coast in the Atlantic, they're basically doing the same thing with European ports, African ports, and then the U.S. So the only time that you're not sort of moving that kind of same circle is if you're moving from like the Indian subcontinent across to Europe and into America. Those are different shipping lanes, but they also there are similar patterns. And in this way, goods are constantly moving around the world, and they're constantly moving from one place to the next. So what you will typically see in an ocean shipping timeline is about a month from one port, from the beginning port to the end, from origin to destination, as we call it. And that's just the like time on the water, as we call it. There are additional things that happen afterwards, like offloading, like getting to port, offloading, drayage, which is its own fun world of logistics, and then the actual like delivery to your door. So all of those steps have their own timelines, but typically you'll see about 4 to 6 weeks from origin, like actually leaving the port, to final destination. It's about 6 weeks. Again, depending upon where you are in the U.S. or wherever it is that you're offloading. So one important and really fun thing about ocean shipping that changed in the 60s, 70s was the the creation of ISO containers. And they're awesome. If you think of them like big Lego bricks. So if you've seen a commercial shipping vessel, it looks something like this, or this would be like maybe a cutout of the side of the ship. This would be the hull. And then you're seeing these boxes stacked up there. Inside of each one of those are a standard set. I'm missing a box. But they're a standard set, and they're all going to be about the same size. There are some differences, but those fall into some pretty standard categories. You've got a 20-foot container, a 40-foot container, and a 40-foot high cube container, which is a little bit taller. But ultimately, they're all going to look and be about the same. And inside of a ship, there are special racks that those containers just sort of slot into. And they're held upright, and they're held and they're locked sort of together between each container and then inside of the rack. So it's really fun to see how these things are loaded. And it's basically like building a big Lego set where you're just kind of dropping pieces in as you need to, and then when you go across the water, you come to a port, and then they'll just pick up those pieces. And then once those pieces are actually, so what they're doing is the people on the shore know where each thing is and where each item needs to come off. Right, each container needs to come off, and so they'll just offload. Right, if this box here needs to come off, they'll take every piece down. They'll take this one off, boop, and then they'll take it onto the port, and they'll put it on a truck, or they'll load it onto the yards there in the port. The other thing that they'll do is they'll then go, oh, this boat is going from, let's say, LA down to Santiago, Chile. They'll go, oh, that's the next stop. We need to put all of the Santiago containers at the very top so that they can get offloaded quicker down the line. So they'll do a bunch of that. They'll do a bunch of mixing, and that's really how ocean shipping works, right? So it's extremely cheap. You can get thousands of these containers onto those ships, and so it makes it extremely efficient, right? Normally, in kind of a normal time, the price for one like 40-foot container is about $3,000 from Hong Kong, or at least Southeast Asia, into the U.S. So it's relatively cheap to get stuff over, and that's how all of your like your $1, $2, items, get across the ocean, is because it's cheap. In the pandemic, right, in 2020 and 2021, we saw ocean container rates jump from about $3,000 per container up to about $20,000 per container, and that was one of the things that was really, pushing towards the supply chain issues that we were seeing, and then it was really causing a bunch of inflation because that money had to get absorbed somewhere else, and so it just sort of gets passed down the line, and the end consumer was having to pay more for their stuff because it costs more money to get stuff across the ocean. And so it's a fascinating world. It's a huge part of the global economy. It's an extremely important pillar to the world and to globalization. And it's a major reason why things cost a whole lot less, right? And there are certain things that you can't actually ship on a boat, or you wouldn't necessarily want to. One of the things that doesn't really do great on a boat is, surprisingly, lithium batteries. They don't, which is funny because they also blow up. They're flammable, so they don't really go well in the air. But we have to move them, so we find ways of doing it. Lithium batteries on the ocean, they have certain charging requirements that they have to have, and typically they'll generally die on the way from Asia to the U.S. So there's lots of oddities to it. The other thing is that boats can be highly customizable. So this is a container ship. There's other things like tankers, obviously tugboats that you're seeing up there, and then there's also like car carriers that just move cars. That's it. And so there's really you can be really customizable, really specialized in the ocean industry. And so again, you're just maximizing profit and maximizing efficiency. So that's really one of what's important about ships and why it's such a huge part of global trade is shipping. So thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. I hope you're enjoying the content on the channel. If you are, please like and subscribe down below. If you have anything that you want me to cover directly, please hit me up in a comment. I read them all. If it's good, I'll put it in a Q&A. If it's really good, I'll make it its own video. But other than that, I want to say thank you so much, and I hope you have a great day.